Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our monthly Lean Focus webinar series. Today's webinar will be covering the topic of Boost Your Bottom Line Fast with the Procurement Savings Boot Camp. My name is April Lee, and I'm the Managing Director of Lean Focus. Our presenter for today is Ryan Lisiak, our Senior Vice President of our Operations Practice, who will be taking us through the Procurement Savings Boot Camp, why it's needed, and how it can help your company save. So for the next slide, before we begin, just a reminder that today's presentation is the proprietary information of Lean Focus and should not be used, disclosed, or reproduced without the consent of Lean Focus. Title in and to this presentation and all information contained herein remains at all times in Lean Focus LLC. So on the next slide, some quick webinar logistics. You are in listen-only mode. There's a PDF handout made available in the control panel to support this topic that you can download. A question and answer segment will be held at the end, so please go ahead and type any questions you may have into the chat function for our presenter to answer as time allows. And lastly, a recording of this webinar will be emailed to you about 1 day later, but you may need to check your spam folder if you don't see it right away. So on the next slide, before we begin, let me share a little bit about Lean Focus and what we do. So we help our clients transform cultures into high performance cultures by helping with training, coaching, mentorship, and sustaining results using our proprietary Lean Focus business system, tools, and processes. We focus on developing and placing driven leaders, either through our training practices or our executive talent solution services that specialize in recruiting and placing top lean and growth talent. We stress the change management element of culture sustainment. So we help build continuous improvement mindsets and ways of working. And then lastly, we apply our proven systems through both our implementation methodology, as well as we license materials for companies to be able to achieve the results over the long term. On the next slide, Lean Focus has 8 practice areas and how we can help drive lean growth and strategic improvements within your business based on the unique industry, challenge areas, product types, and organizational needs you might have. Our team comes from leadership backgrounds that help you navigate your strategy at a holistic, enterprise-wide perspective with the ability to drive down and teach associates how to implement and sustain those improvements on the front line. We specialize in culture transformation at all levels of the business, pulling from the expertise of our commercial, growth, and operations practitioners, private equity, senior leaders, and talent solutions professionals. So on the next slide, there are some examples of companies that we've helped build high performance cultures with. And as you can see, our methodology is industry agnostic and can be applicable to any area of manufacturing, operations, and even commercial areas such as sales, marketing, customer service, etc. We help our clients identify what strategic objective they're trying to achieve, and we can apply the right approach and lean tool to help get them there. On the next slide, we use our proprietary Lean Focus business system tool set, which I know it's very, very difficult to read all of these, but the idea is that we are helping to build a sustainable culture by identifying first, what are you trying to achieve? And we'll help you identify the appropriate tools that might be driven and useful for you in that endeavor. These materials can be licensed materials as well, so you can help build a lean business system out of the box, whatever works for the best initiatives for your company. And we help strive to build that culture of continuous improvement, people development, and performance achievement. So on the next slide, when we think of the concept of lean, we're not just talking about eliminating wastes, but we're also creating value for our customers. And with that, there are certain value creation levers you can pull within the business. For today's topic, we'll be really hitting home on the supplier negotiations, cost of poor quality, inventory reduction, and payables improvements that can be achieved with the Procurement Savings Boot Camp approach. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenter for today, Ryan.
All right, thanks, April. Hi, my name is Ryan Lisiak. Thanks for your time today, really appreciate it. I've been learning and practicing lean and supply chain for over 20 years now. I've been with Lean Focus though for about 3 years of that. Like all my colleagues, as April said, I am not a lifelong consultant. We at Lean Focus have led departments and businesses. We know what good looks like and we know what fake looks like. I started my lean journey with Danaher Corporation, first leading the application of lean for one of their operating companies. Then I led a supply chain, a marketing team, and finally a business unit. I then went to Waste Management, where I managed about $1 billion to spend and leading the supply chain in one of their businesses in Connecticut, which is where I live. After that, I was vice president, general manager with overall P&L responsibility for a few manufacturing companies. So I've seen a lot of businesses, big and small, early and late in their lean journey, mature and just getting started with supply chain excellence. I've led supply chains and entire businesses, and I bring this perspective to my clients and working with them, and I'd like to share some thoughts today. So I want to talk to you about a subject that's near and dear to me, and that's sourcing events. April just talked to you about lean focus, so I'll then start with the most important question to ask, and that's why. Why should you consider a procurement boot camp? Then I'll talk about how lean focus may be able to help. Then finally, we'll discuss next steps and open it up to questions. So let's dive in and start with the why. Taking a step back, there are numerous problems that we've seen with supply chains, especially recently, and you can see some of the likely ones listed here. First is inventory. Too much and too little inventory can both bloat a balance sheet as well as shut a line down. Worse, both often happen at the same time, where a company has one, maybe 2 turns of inventory while constantly being plagued with stockouts. This may result from supply chain problems or an inability to foresee risk with your suppliers. Passing the blame on to the suppliers, though, for poor quality and or inadequate delivery is just a scapegoat for what I've seen as the real problem, and that's often the sourcing process itself. What I'm going to talk about today is what I believe through years of experience is a better way to manage supplier spend. So why is this important? As we've just talked about, there's a lot more to sourcing than just cost. Yes, improving gross margins is often a goal and a good one, but as anyone who's managed a P&L will tell you, sweeping that cost below the line from gross margins into SG&A is not only not a true cost reduction, but often results in a net loss of overall operating margins. Good spend management instead highlights opportunities within your supplier network to remedy poor suppliers of quality and delivery. Good spend management properly addresses risk and performance and builds trust with your suppliers. Yes, good spend management controls cost, but as I'll talk about in a bit, there's a total cost of ownership that needs to take into account for supplier quality, delivery, and piece price. So perhaps I made it seem too easy. Why have I seen companies fail in properly managing spend? First, and most obvious, is conflicting goals. When one department is responsible for lowering piece price, another for designing a quality part, and yet another for getting parts on time, there is inherently conflicts of interest. When these departments are not aligned or in close discussion to make a best collaborative decision, there's often chaos. Management often exacerbates the problem by expecting each department to maximize their own objectives, often at the expense of the other. Tools and systems can also worsen the problem if they are not integrated to allow for visibility into making the best overall decision. So let's dig more into supplier spend management and first talk about what it's not. This is not a process to just squeeze suppliers or worse, bluff for a short-term financial win. It should not be a go-get, as I've sometimes seen, where sourcing is given an arbitrary target to make the numbers. This is definitely not about treating all suppliers the same or commoditizing the value they add in your supply chain. Spend management is also not just about pretty charts, data, and tools that are themselves useless. I call this fake sourcing, which seeks only to mask true intentions of only lowering piece price. Importantly, though, spend management is not a process where we settle for the prices offered by our suppliers. You don't, after all, always get what you pay for. So what is it then? Spend management takes a look at the entire spend, but as I'll talk about later, focuses efforts on the critical few. It takes a holistic, total cost of ownership perspective to make the best overall decision that will truly improve the bottom line, not just gross margins. Spend management uses facts and data to constantly strengthen the supplier relationships and thus the whole company. Finally, if done right, I believe that good spend management could deliver a differentiating advantage over your competitors. I believe that it's not necessarily good companies that beat bad companies, but rather good supply chains that beat bad supply chains. So thus, good spend management should focus on strengthening your supply chain to allow your company to grow and take share. So why are we focusing on supplier spend? Well, Just as the legendary bank robber Willie Sutton once said when asked by FBI agents, "Willie, why do you rob banks?" He replied dryly, "Because that's where the money is." As this chart from the IRS shows, material costs make up on average 42% of the total expenditures for manufacturing companies. This far dwarfs other costs of labor, rent, and supplies. So we're not robbing banks, but like Willie Sutton said, we're going to focus where the money is. So how can we help? This sounds so easy, right? Well, years of experience has shown me that there's a right way and a wrong way to manage supplier spend. First, we need to recognize that this event really has three phases. Good spend management starts weeks before an event with good preparation. This is where we gather lots of facts and lots of data, such as where we spend our money, what price we pay, what price we used to pay, what about similar parts or services, what have commodity prices done, how about exchange rates? You get the idea. We then meet for a few days to generate strategies and an action plan, which I'll talk about next. But before we do, it's worth mentioning that we're not done. Our efforts are not done after the meet phase. Meeting concludes with a plan and projected improvements, great, but that itself is pointless without good execution. This process of execution takes time, but also good ammunition. So what do I mean by ammunition? This is useful facts and data that need to come from the first two phases to ensure that these actions are done properly. This third act phase is the most commonly overlooked phase in a procurement bootcamp. We don't want to simply give targets and actions, then complain when the actions are done poorly or in a non-standard way. We want to instead arm the team that will be doing the work as much as possible. So let's dig more into that meat phase. What are we doing? There's lots of good discussion, but there should be at least 6 main deliverables that come out of the event. We'll talk about each in future slides, but in summary, first is an analysis of spend, what is often called an ABC analysis. This highlights and agrees upon where we want to focus our efforts for the rest of the event. Second is an analysis of recent trends in underlying commodities and exchange rates. It also involves a consensus building effort that aligns the team around the impact these fluctuations should have on the price we pay. Next, number 3, we are assessing suppliers on a myriad of factors such as risk, quality, delivery, and cost. Then in number 4, we put the piece together into a list of suppliers to target and what we expect to see. But we aren't done. Deliverable number 5, I believe, is the most critical, which is standard work for those who will execute the sourcing activities. In this step, the team documents the process and the justification to be used in the forthcoming supplier negotiations. Then finally, we assign actions and build sustainability into the process so that it will become ingrained into the sourcing culture in the future. Next, I'll drill into each of these 6 deliverables. So the first step, as I mentioned, is most commonly done as pre-work, is that an analysis of spend. Our goal in this step is to find out where to focus our efforts. We want to target the major areas of spend, which is often called a commodity code. For example, machine parts or plastics. The team will sort the spend, then use the Pareto principle, which is also known as the 80-20 rule, to find major points of focus for commodity codes and or suppliers. So in this fictitious example on the screen, we would focus on the first 3 commodity codes because they have a cumulative spend in total, which exceeds 80% of our total spend. In the second phase, we want to get a take for how underlying commodity prices have been trending. So like a good golfer, we want to assess which way the wind is blowing on our suppliers' costs. So we're going to playing their hand. We want to gauge this trend over different time periods, such as 3, 6, 12 months, to get a feel for whether these changes are accelerating or decelerating. We'll also want to perform the same exercise for relevant exchange rates. So if we had suppliers in, say, China, Italy, and Japan, we'd want to calculate the relevant change to those 3 currencies versus the US dollar. Same thing for any relevant changes to import duties from these countries. This analysis, again, is often done as pre-work, then reviewed and assessed with the team during the event. Oops, missed a slide. Third step, we are assessing supplier performance. We are assessing the year-over-year change in cost history but just as important, we are gauging each supplier's risk, quality of product, on-time delivery, inventory of their product on our shelves, and the technical capabilities they offer. We are at a minimum giving a subjective red, yellow, green for these factors, so whether they have consistently met, sometimes met, or seldomly met expectations, but better would be to have data and a goal as to whether they have been red or green. We also, though, could, as this slide shows, take a hybrid solution where if we have some of the data, like for in this example, cost, we could have a hybrid of the quantitative and the qualitative solution. But the whole idea here is to take a comprehensive view of suppliers and not just limiting ourselves to cost. We want more data. So ideally we have more numbers than just straight colors, but we do want to take a comprehensive view and not to be limited to the factors for which we have data. The fourth step, we start putting some of those pieces together. We combine the analysis done in the first three steps and start to generate strategies for who to target and how much of a change of a cost is justified to seek. The other factors, such as quality, delivery, risk, should guide our strategies of who is the supplier we want to reward with more business and those who want to take a longer approach and resource. For those we want to negotiate with, we also want to achieve team consensus on a realistic target savings. This estimation should start with the mathematical justification we research, but adjust for how much of each underlying commodity that the supplier likely uses in creating their product. We also want to further dampen this change by multiplying by their likely material cost of sales. Obviously, we won't know exactly, but we'll want to estimate this likely material cost of sales. We would then adjust the number for factors such as whether we're giving them more business, their recent cost history, the effects of poor quality or poor delivery, like expedite fees. The point is that it's not entirely mathematical, but there's a basis of justification rooted in the math based on commodity and FX trends. This makes our target more realistic, but also more justifiable when it's time to discuss this change of business with the supplier. The fifth step, as I mentioned, is what I think is the most important step, but it's also the most commonly overlooked. Before the team parts ways, we want to arm those who will execute our plan. We want to create a succinct but useful document that standardizes the context as well as the process for the negotiations to come. This helps reduce variability in execution, as well as provides the buyer or whomever will lead the discussion with the supplier with what the team feels is the best tone and justification for the negotiation. We'll also include team thoughts on pushback. We want to expect pushback, but we also want to brainstorm things that we could say in response. We'll also brainstorm ways to expand the pie. What can we ask for in return, such as better payment terms or consignment of inventory, if we concede a lower reduction. In summary, this important document will help align all team members with how we will negotiate in this specific negotiation process. Finally, we want to assign actions with a specific individual, so not a department, and a specific date, not a month, not a quarter, but a day, of when we expect to be done. This ensures we can monitor each action as a project and estimate when benefit will be realized. Again, this benefit is not just piece price, but rather includes things like improvements to risk, improvements to quality, improvements to delivery. May also lead to benefits in working capital if any improvements to the inventory arrangement or payment terms can be negotiated. So in summary, spend management is a comprehensive process that should align sourcing efforts with other departments such as engineering and production. We come away with a realistic plan with estimated benefit, owners, and dates. Through this workshop, we are also highlighting other areas within the supply chain that need improvement, such as risk or over-reliance on single sources of supply. These issues may need to be dealt with later so as to keep the scope of the event within reason. And finally, this is a collaborative effort that relies upon the contributions and input of a cross-functional team. This should be seen as a positive, productive event that improves your company across a wide variety of factors and ultimately improves overall profitability. April.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. Very informative, and hopefully all of our attendees got a little bit of something they can take away. But always with Ryan, you can always reach out to him if you have any questions about your particular situation, as we know that there will be different circumstances with every business organization and where you're entering this process from. So what to do next? Next steps and resources. Let's talk about it. Let's go on the next slide. On the main dashboard of this GoToWebinar menu, you should see an option to be able to download the handout related to this topic. And Tyler M., thank you for your feedback. We did fix a typo that you caught, so we've been able to update the new version live. So always appreciate that continuous improvement process. But if you have any questions, there's information about who to reach out to, but we can always do a pre-consult with you to understand a little bit more about your situation and identify an approach as you might need. With the next slide, if you like this webinar and you're looking for more topics of interest, please visit us at leanfocus.com under the Thought Leadership section, and you can sign up for other webinars, or there's other topics on demand. We also have a monthly newsletter that circulates out with some really interesting topics, job opportunities, different things that might be of interest to you. So go ahead and sign up for our newsletter there. And we routinely host these webinars at least once a month, so you'll at least be notified about new interesting topics that come out. And then lastly, if we go to the next slide, we're going to open this up to any questions that you have. So you're on mute, but go ahead and type them into the chat function, and we'll answer them while we've got Ryan here. So Ryan, this first question comes in. This seems to be a very manufacturing-centric process. Does it apply to service-based sourcing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I made the content a little bit too manufacturing centric based on some of the research, and it certainly is a industry that has done a lot of these, but it absolutely applies to any operational process, any services section. We use it at waste management. So absolutely didn't want to give the impression that it was just strictly for manufacturing.
Oh, great, thanks so much. This next question comes in. Can this apply in times of inflation? Oh, very topical.
Yeah. That's a tough one. That's kind of my golfer analogy, right? We want to first assess which way the winds are blowing, and like a sailor, you can sail when the wind is blowing against you. You just need to know how to navigate the waters well. And so it's a little tougher, obviously, and the amount that you can realize is obviously less. But one of the advantages of this boot camp is that it's not just strictly looking at costs, and it's not just strictly looking at commodity prices. So there is value with it within your company to optimize how you spend your money. So you can improve a delivery situation, you can improve a quality situation, and you can give business from one poor supplier to another. And so there is often savings to be realized by voluming up, if you will, right, by giving more to a good supplier and therefore justifying a cost reduction. So absolutely, it's a little bit different, a little harder, but it absolutely can apply in times of inflation.
And Ryan, just to build off of that, given that every year there are different external variables that come at us, is this kind of boot camp, is it a one and done, or is it something you should do annually?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is definitely something you want to try to make as standard work within your organization, is to look at your supply chain for means of improvement, right? So quality, delivery, cost, and so this should be at least annually. I would stress this should be if not quarterly, maybe semi-annually, where you're taking a comprehensive look, but you're executing the projects over a longer period of time. So if you have sourcing projects, obviously those don't take a day or a week, those take a while to execute, even negotiations. So you can't really do these too frequently, but you want to make sure that you're doing these routinely so that you are constantly evolving kind of that continuous improvement mindset to your supply chain.
And Ryan, if people are preparing for this, it says Procurement Savings Boot Camp, but it sounds like it's also cross-functional, impacts other departments. How would you get alignment or people to onboard attending this kind of event?
Yeah, great question. So ultimately, it does impact the bottom line. So there should be alignment within your organization that this is something worth doing. but the benefits improve the other departments as well. So, and why engineering loves to participate in a cross-functional total cost of ownership spend workshop such as this is that you're not just strictly looking at piece price and picking the cheapest supplier. And so they love to have a say in it. I've got lots of positive feedback from engineers that have taken part in workshops that I've facilitated. Same thing for production, right? So you are inherently making their life easier by picking suppliers and rewarding suppliers that have proven good on-time delivery. So there certainly are non-financial benefits that will resonate with folks. So there is the financial piece that will certainly resonate with management and the finance folks, but then there are soft benefits to other departments. So there does need to be sometimes an internal sell for why they should participate in what is procurement's job. But I believe that good procurement, good spend management is not just one department, because as I talked about in the presentation, I think that leads to just optimizing one element of the company's balance sheet.
Great, thank you so much, Ryan. Tyler M asks, could you share what this falls on the lean focused business system? This morning I read about management information systems. Would this be an example compared to a digital transformation project? Could it be both?
This is a workshop that we would host within our procurement practice area. April talked about 8 different practice areas. So it falls within the procurement practice area, where we would have an individual work with your team. And on those 3 phases, so there'd be a preparation and a meet and then an act phase. And we would facilitate all 3 with a lean focus resource being the primary facilitator.
And regarding this question about, the digital transformation, we're not necessarily changing systems, right? We're really just changing the approach and the actions needed.
Yeah, good. Sorry, yeah, thanks. Good clarification. Correct. It's using your existing systems better than you may be using them today. So yeah. Thanks, April. Good clarification. So it's relying upon the data of those systems, but then how you make decisions and the strategies is a different process, and that's what we're introducing here is a different way of looking at it cross-functionally and with comprehensive data to make a best overall decision.
Great. And to that point, and the next question asks, how do you recommend, or what do you recommend if the data we have is inadequate or can't be trusted?
Yeah, that's a tough one. No, I've yet to come across a company in my career that thinks they have good data. So that's the first thing that I'll mention. But kind of use what you have, right? So I talked about that hybrid solution of if you have cost, use the cost data. If you have supplier PPM, use supplier PPM. But if you don't trust it, I would rather the team have a consensus who's a good supplier at delivery, who's a bad supplier at delivery, rather than rely upon data that everybody views as suspect, because then you won't have consensus on making the right decision. Because if you're looking at that data and trying to base a decision on it, and people don't have faith in what you're basing your decision on, that's never a good thing. So you may need to fall back on more of the hybrid solution if you don't trust your data as much, but I would not use that as a deterrent, if you will, of not doing the event, because we don't have good enough data. You can always do an event with just partial data as we talked about.
Great. This question comes in from Faisal. In present times, when we're talking of nearshoring and moving away from China, how should an organization gear up for the changes, especially on cost effectiveness?
Yeah, great question, and that's where the comprehensive view really needs to come into play in terms of risk. Risk can be not just continuity risk, but also supply chain risk of shutting things down from a supplier in Southeast Asia or in Eastern Europe. And so I would absolutely include that as a category, even as to is this a supplier in a region that we view as risky. So I would encourage you to have that factored into your decision making and have it be known that was factored in, and so that you have more than just the piece price as to why you didn't select a certain supplier.
Right. Thanks, Ryan. Along that same lines, how does geopolitical uncertainty, such as Taiwan or Ukraine, Russia, factor into this process?
Yeah, that's where the risk column comes into play in big space. So, what we've defined as green, yellow, red, you can define what makes it up in those three colors, or if you've got data that will help guide you for those regions, I'd include it there. But that's where that column really should speak volumes for decisions and strategies that you're making.
Right. All right. Well, Ryan, I think that's all the questions that we've got submitted. Just wanted to say thank you so much for such a great presentation. We wanted to thank all of our attendees as well for joining us today. And again, don't forget to download that handout on the dashboard of the GoToWebinar. And with that, we'll go ahead and close this out. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.